Good afternoon. This is Chandra Easton here from StarAstrologyHealing.com, esoteric astrologer. And I just thought I'd review one of the talks that I did a couple of years ago, which was focused upon the solar eclipse of the 26th of December 2019. And if you know anything about eclipses, you would realise that they impact over a 3-year period, and that they operate in families. And that they are visible in certain places on the planet. So in this talk here, I'm just really going to review the eclipse from Boxing Day 2019, and in hindsight, it's always a wonderful thing. So let's go forward. Now, that eclipse did occur in Indonesia, which I was concerned about on a number of levels, but primarily to do with the fact that Indonesia is one of the most volcanically dangerous places on the planet because of the high number of equatorial volcanoes in that region that potentially, if they erupt at once, and this is all around the Pacific, can have an impact, on the whole planet. Of course, when we're talking about eclipses, we have free will, the free will of the individuals and the nations. There is spiritual grace involved. There is a greater plan that you or I are unable to perceive. And there are points in human history where spiritual intervention can occur. So there's no hard and fast methodology of pointing to what exactly will or won't happen. It's mitigating factors. Just briefly review the eclipse chart. The eclipse is sitting here in the 4th degree. That's the sun and the moon sitting in Capricorn in the 4th degree, conjunct Jupiter. The most striking thing about this chart is the amount of planets in Capricorn. There's the moon and the sun, Jupiter and the past life point, the south node, and Vulcan and Saturn. And most of these planets are falling in the 8th house, which is associated with death and money. It's also got a great deal to do with secrecy. And then Saturn and Pluto, that were travelling together in Capricorn there, have fallen in the house of international trade. So, of course, in hindsight, and Capricorn has a tremendous amount to do with governments and government wealth and bureaucracies and power corporations. So, of course, over the last couple of years, because this eclipse runs from December 2019 for 3 years, that's through to the end of 2020, the end of 2021, and the end of 2022. So we still have 11 more months to run of this eclipse. We've had a great concentration of power in the hands of the world governments, and they've exerted power over citizens, and certainly in the Western democratic world, citizens have lost almost, I don't know, it's 80 or 90, a huge percentage of their democratic rights on the basis of the pandemic. And there's been an economic burden, there have been loss of livelihood, there's been attempt to collapse or wipe out small business. There have been suicides en masse. There's been all kinds of contractions and constrictions that have gone across the world. Yes. As I said, I was concerned about the Ring of Fire, and I continue to be concerned about the Ring of Fire. And the Ring of Fire, as you will know, goes from the southern tip of South America up the South American plate, past the Cocos Plate, up the west coast of North America, across the Aleutian Trench, dominating Japan, dominating that's Russia, isn't it? Up there in Japan, down around the Indonesian islands, directly through New Guinea, through the Micronesia and Melanesia, and down to the Pacific. So this whole region here, and Hawaii in the middle, is very dangerous because the eclipse, the location of the eclipse was just sort of northeast of the Java Trench. Yeah. Okay. One of the planets that was very potent and telling in that eclipse chart was Jupiter in Capricorn. And Jupiter's at its fall in Capricorn. It was right on top of the eclipse. And so, of course, what we have seen, as I predicted, were the right-wing, ultra-conservative leaderships. Surprise, 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 certainly in many countries, including Australia, our supposed party who, 50 years ago were there for the working people have taken an ultra conservative view and have locked people down in their homes. We've had an inordinate amount of government secrecy, and should I say secrecy that's come from the very top, from the World Health Organization, and they've been in damage control. Materialism's definitely overtaken the heart. And, well, it's very shocking, really, to hear of the vaccine billionaires who've made squillions of dollars as out of result of the health crisis. This eclipse did fall in the 8th house, and I spoke to you about the need for governments to use wisely their power, their money, their resources, and of course, I think you could say the opposite has happened. Yes, I don't know whether we've had any governments collapse, but we've certainly had a crisis, a fiscal crisis, and some of the things that we've been meant to be doing and moving over this 3-year period, and we still have 11 months to go, is to use wisely resources. Think carefully about how you spend your money, in what way you spend your money. Elect, if it's possible, leaders who are coming from the heart. Society is meant to care for its most vulnerable, and what we've done with the most vulnerable is lock them down and lock them out. The elderly people have been locked down in the nursing homes. They've been injected with untested so-called vaccines. The children in Australia are being lined up to be injected and or tested. There's a refusal to allow people to participate in society. They've been effectively locked out of society. So we couldn't have asked for a worst-case scenario of the misuse of the power indicated by these planets in Capricorn and the stellium in the 8th house. Many people would have gone into fiscal and national debt. And, there have been a lot of people moving from cities to the country in Australia. Some people have been making enormous amounts of money as the housing balloon bubble has increased and increased and increased. Other people have gone to the wall financially. And the thing that we don't see behind the scenes is who's pulling the strings. Who are the power elite who are pulling the strings of making the governments dance to their tune, making the World Health Organization dance to their tune, paying off scientists so they put out, they become the false gods. I don't have to use the word malevolent. There's a malevolent energy in the background pulling the strings, and I believe it's to do with gaining control of finances, global finances. We had the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and I believe that they are an organisation who are working for control of the planet by forcing and removing cash and pushing people into the digital economy and into the digital world. Now, one of the significant ways that this has happened, and this is connected to the Saturn-Pluto in the 9th in the chart, is people have been tracked and traced all in the name of an invisible virus. And, of course, once the virus disappears or abates, then they still have the tracking and tracing, and everybody's on a data bank and everybody's on a system. And more sinister indeed is the factual evidence that's there for anyone to see on the Moderna website to do with the fact that their vaccines are really intelligence nanobots. Yes, and so we have a terrifying merger of the biology of the human via the supposed immunisations and these nanobots that are merging us with the IT world, the Internet of Things. So we become a commodity. Just previously, you've had a trademark or a stamp on an item that you buy. Now, individuals, the human biology, is being trademarked and stamped for nefarious purposes of control of you as an individual, your rights, your national, your civic, your civilian, your human rights. And so what we have here is the world of money and the world of medicine and the world of the IT converging. Saturn and Pluto in the 9th house. This has been a global issue and it continues. We have had, at the beginning of this period when the eclipse first happened, we had the trade war escalating. And I'd warned about the encroachment of the freedom of speech and civil liberties and government secrecy and government surveillance. And if you don't know what's been happening in Australia, then I recommend that you watch the documentary Battleground, Melbourne. And that'll give you some idea of what's been going on that's not reported. We've had a complete clampdown of our media, of our national broadcasters, and they are in lockstep with the government, and the government are in lockstep with the mega corporations, who are in lockstep with the finance billionaires, who ultimately are trying to gather power and money and humans as a commodity under their umbrella. So it's very hard to see that anything good has come out of this incredibly powerful eclipse. There's been great misuse of power. We don't know whether we don't know who started it. Is it the Chinese who are misusing the power, or is it the global organisations like the IMF and the World Health Organization, or is it a conglomerate of global leaders feathering their own nests? And all we know is that there's been grave misuse of power, and this was esoterically connected to Vulcan on the south node point in Capricorn in that eclipse. We have had people marching on the street, and I talk about the fact that people were marching because the earth needed to be cared for. But in fact, people have been marching for their own civil liberties, for their own bodily, biological freedom. The eclipses come in families and histories, and I did talk in the first talk about the fact that this particular eclipse in the family of eclipses was associated with traumatic transformation. We've had 2 years of it, and this will continue until the end of 2022. Previously, in the last 100 years, we've had the Wall Street crash and the Great Depression, and so now we know we've had the pandemic crisis. We also had Argentine crises, and we've had a lot of rioting. So rather than the issues being contained to South America or North America, these have been global. The transformation has been global. The people getting to their feet and finding their voice has been global. And I think behind the scenes we have the puppeteers trying to pull a financial coup on the economy of the world. Yeah, so some of the themes that happen whenever this family of eclipses occurs is a global economic crash. We've had that, a political upheaval. We've had that, international trade constrictions. We've had that. You've only got to look on the supermarket shelves in Australia to realise that all kinds of products are unable to be purchased. They come from overseas, that we're in crisis. We're having natural disasters. Most recently, we've had the very serious Tongan earthquake, and of course the Pacific is the dangerous area. We are yet to have the forced digital economy where cash has been withdrawn. So it's extremely important that you understand that if you don't use cash, you'll lose it. If every single person who wants to maintain economic control of their lives uses cash, then we will slow down and stop this plan, because that's stage 2. Stage 1 of the plan, as I see it, has been associated with compliance and the voluntary handing over of civil liberties and the inoculations, the untested inoculations, and the forcing of people into a global database. And what's coming stage 2 is the forced digital economy, the withdrawal of cash. So take money out of the bank, not $100 notes, because they're the first to be withdrawn, no doubt. Shop locally, stop using your plastic as much as you possibly can. Put your money with ethical credit unions and get it out of the banks that are in cahoots with the global elite who are engineering this crisis. We've had the space race as part of the family theme, and what we don't know and what we're not hearing about at the moment is how the space race is running. Why would the elite who are attempting this coup on democracy, what are they going to do in space? We know that Elon Musk's headed off to Mars, and my sixth sense is that whatever their plans are, it won't have a good outcome. It's something to do with the dominion of space via the Internet of Things. Yeah. And of course, this is where a lot of money is being funneled into, the money for their next step too. So this is your money and my money and our capacity to access cash. There has been unwinnable wars in this family, and of course, we are currently in an unwinnable war against a mysterious virus that we have to constantly be jabbed against. And the attempt is to inoculate and jab and control the children from birth all the way through. There have also been coronations. Now, we have seen significant world leaders pass away. Just trying to think of the name of the, I've gone blank. The South African freedom fighter who's passed away recently. We've also had Thich Nhat Hanh pass away recently. We've had Prince Philip pass away. So the changing of the guard of the souls who are on earth, part of the coronations theme. What can we do about this? Grow trees, plant seeds, build communities, make do without, be careful how you spend your money, barter. Now, in the first talk, I talked a lot about the communication restrictions, and that was because there was a focus in the Indonesian chart in the third house. And my mistake was that I thought that the communication problem, the censorship problem, the freedom of press problem, the inability to trade was going to be around Indonesia. But in fact, it's been the whole planet. Yeah? The inability for governments to work effectively with supply chains has happened planetary, not just in the place where the eclipse occurred. I am still concerned about Saturn because of the volcanic activity and because we are in the middle of the ring of fire there in the Indonesian eclipse. I won't talk to you about the Australian chart, but I will compare the Australian chart to that eclipse and you'll see all the planets in Capricorn. There they are sitting up in the 9th house of the eclipse, and of course we have been isolated from the world, and we've had our government attempted to keep the dangerous virus away and lock us down and in our homes and annihilate a small business in this country and lock down the elderly. Yes, so we've had this enormous constriction on our media, on our international relationships, on our personal freedom. You'll see the Aries rising in the Australian chart. I think Melbourne was the most locked down city in the world, and I say that Australia is the most locked out. You can't call it a democracy anymore. We're moving towards a technocracy, being forced like lemmings towards the cliff to sign up to the digital world, to be tracked and traced forever, to be jabbed forever, in order that when cash is removed and all finances are controlled through an overview, not just your local bank, not your government, but through the, megalomaniac people in charge of this coup. I did talk about the crisis in Australia. That would be the earth. I talked about drought, talked about water and mining. And of course, what's happened in Western Australia is that the Western Australian Premier has attempted to defend the economy of Western Australia by locking his people down and locking out the remainder of the Australian citizens. So effectively, Western Australia has been its own empire for the last 2 years. And I don't have any doubt that this is to protect the mining industry, and it's nothing to do with protecting the people. I spoke about the crisis with refugees, and I thought that it would be refugees coming to Australia, that we'd have more of them and that we'd have persecution of them. But of course what's happened is that a lot of Australians who'd been overseas at the time of the crisis have been unable to return. So we've had Australian citizens who've been refugees unable to return to Australia, and then we've had each state locked down away from other states. So a person living in New South Wales has been unable to visit or interact with their family and loved ones in Western Australia and vice versa. Say nothing of the ongoing inhumanity of some of the refugees who are locked up in our capital cities, and I know that there's one young man who's been locked up for 7 years. So that continues. Some of the scenarios that I talked about were a commodities crash, whereas in fact I think what's happening is a lot of people are taking their money out of the banks because they don't trust them, and they're buying land, they're buying water tanks, they're buying food, they're planting trees, they're buying gold, they're buying silver. We have had a housing crisis, but it's all the prices, I think, is at 30%. House price in Australia has gone up. The baby boomers have been the ones who've been frightened to within an inch of their lives because, broadly speaking, the older generation have more chronic illness, so they consider themselves more susceptible to the imaginary virus. And I don't suggest that it's imaginary is the wrong word, but a virus that can take them out. And of course, it will, and it has had strong implications on people. But what's not been documented is the vaccine injuries and the vaccine deaths. This has all been shoved under the carpet, and the anti-vaxxers have been blamed. So people have been marginalised, and the marginalisation has gone between those who choose a different medical history to another. Yes, one of the gravest concerns has been the misuse of power, particularly associated with freedom of speech and the surveillance society that's been running effectively in China for, a decade or so, and now it's gone global. So China's exported the surveillance society to the world, and effectively you'd say that we have had a dismantling of democracy, and this will continue over the next 12 months. We've become a police state in Australia. There's an enormous loss of civil liberties. Where is the International Court of Justice in the middle of this? Nowhere. Where are the commissions that work with human rights? Well, there are powerful, wonderful lawyers in every continent who have stepped out of the corrupt system and who are challenging it in the courts. The government's secrecy has never been higher. What can we do about it? Maintain hope. Absolutely maintain hope. Grow food, network with your community. This is the way forward. I think I'll leave